Today I'd like to continue with chapter 10 of the Gospel of Matthew. We're in that section around verse 17 where Jesus is kind of being very realistic with the 12. He's letting them know that this mission that he's given them, all the instructions he's given to them, all of the preparation he's made with them, that their task is not going to be an easy one. I think this is very important for us because sometimes we get caught up in the simplicity of all of this. If I had the right words, if I had the right approach, if I had the correct video or posting, this would be easy. People would accept it. It would be simple. Why is it that I'm not getting the great results that I would like to get? And sometimes we can be discouraged by that. We can say, well, at least I tried, it didn't work out. But Jesus, a little bit more realistic. Those rose-colored glasses are definitely off, and he tells us this is going to be difficult. And it's getting more difficult as the chapter goes on. And verse 17 really epitomizes it. In verse 17 he says, "But beware of people, for they will hand you over to courts and scourge you in their synagogues." Imagine being one of the apostles and hearing this. Well, got to beware of certain people because they're going to, evaluate you, take a look at you, and say, well, I think we'll sue you. I think we'll take you to court. I don't like what you're saying. Why do I want to get involved with this? I don't want to be spending a lot of time in court. I'd rather be spending it, in other pursuits than dealing with the courts and the legal system. And as if that is not bad enough, there's going to be some legal entanglements here. People are going to hand you over. They're going to be looking for the least misstep. You said this wrong. You defamed me. You did that. Boom. You're dealing with that nonsense. Then on top of that, they will scourge you in their synagogues. So bad enough that I'm dealing with the court system, which I don't want to deal with. Now, on top of that, I'm going to go to their places of worship and assembly, and they're going to start scourging me. And so Jesus is indicating, there is going to be some religious division here. A lot of times we're a little bit taken aback that there's tensions between different religions. Well, a careful reading, actually not even a careful reading, just a very obvious reading of both the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures will let you know that when it comes to religion, you're in for it. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be conflicts, trials. People will be opposed to you. People have their own opinions, their viewpoints. Tolerance is not something that is very widely practiced. People have their viewpoints, and if you have a different viewpoint, they're not happy with it. And sometimes that lack of happiness with it leads to all sorts of physical problems where, you get beaten up and put in jail and attacked, assaulted, all of that stuff. So that should be our expectation, Jesus is saying. This is not going to be the exceptional situation. This is going to be what's going to happen. You have to beware of it. Be on guard for it. Be alert to it. This is going to happen. This is interesting in Matthew because it basically is relating the experience of the early church. This was not easy going in the early church. Sometimes we idealize the early church. Oh, it was so nice, wonderful, at the apostles, close to Jesus. They have that passage in the Acts of the Apostles where they all shared things together. They lived in community. Each one was provided for. Oh, such a blissful, wonderful period. This was great. And then you take a careful look at the historical record, which is pretty faithfully given to us in the scriptures, and this ain't so. I mean, this was not easy going in the early church, not easy going in the church of the Middle Ages, which sometimes people ideal, oh, everybody was Christian, it was wonderful. No, not so when you look carefully at the record. And it's certainly not true today, where there is division and discord. And Jesus is saying that's the reality of the human situation. You have those human beings, and they have their opinions, and people get firm, they get set up, they get dug in those opinions. And if you have a contrary opinion, and they don't like that contrary opinion, they're going to let you know. They're going to hound you and go after you, and think that you're possessed by the devil and all this, and we got to stop you. So Jesus is saying, expect it. Be on the lookout for it. Be aware of it. You're going to see too that there's persecution, both by the Jews. We hear about the synagogue, and in verse 18, we're going to hear about governors and kings who are Gentiles. So we sometimes think, well, the persecution came primarily from the Jewish side. Certainly not true. Many Jewish people accepted the faith. Many Jewish people were tolerant. There certainly was some persecution, but we can over-dramatize it, certainly. We have to be careful about that because it can lead to anti-Semitism. But in the scriptures here, in 17, and we're going to see now later in 18, it's equal opportunity persecution. Because 18 says, you will be led before governors and kings for my sake, as a witness before them and the pagans. So the governors and the kings who were not Jewish, who were Gentiles, they get in on it too, and they did some persecuting. So there was persecution all around, and there still is. There is, people who don't like religious people, and the religious people, unfortunately, who are prejudiced themselves, who, in some ways, kind of cause that type of persecution by what they say and what they do. So it's a complex picture. And certainly it's one we have to be very careful of because we want to avoid giving that type of example where we are attacking other people for their beliefs and not respecting their freedom. As certainly Jesus did. Jesus knew that there were people who would accept and not accept the message. And there are people who initially would accept it and then later on reject it. Certainly we have that example in Judas. And there were people who would reject it and later on accept it. We saw that with Thomas, right, with his doubting and his believing. So we have to be patient. We have to be careful. We have to leave it ultimately in the hands of God. And we have to respect the dignity of each and every person and what they say and what they believe. And certainly that's the message that Jesus wants to give to us. When it talks about them giving this people over to courts, courts can also be translated as councils. That can refer to the Great Council of Jerusalem of the 72 members. So that Great Council that was convoked when there were matters to be settled in terms of religious practice and sacrifices and how the affairs of the religion should be conducted among the people. So the council was helpful with that. It had 72 members, and this council examined from the evidence of scriptures both Jesus and the apostles on various occasions. And that was their right and responsibility to do that, to make sure that people were not spreading false teachings about the faith and encouraging bad things among the people where they would separate from the religious practices of the day. Also refers to, in addition, local councils. So there was the Great Council in Jerusalem, but there were, of course, local councils in the various towns. The Talmud prescribes that in a community that numbers as much as 120, there should be a local council of 23 members. So the Grand Council had 72 members. The local councils, of course, with a smaller population, they would have 23 members. So the idea of these councils was important, that it was broad-based. It wasn't just a few people, 72 for the larger uh, national religious practices, and the local ones 23, so that there'd be a wide representation of people from various aspects of the community, so that the judgment wasn't skewed one way or the other. When it talks about scourging, this was suffered by St. Paul, the scourging. So we see that it was scourged, not only, of course, Jesus was scourged, but St. Paul and certainly some of the other apostles. This was limited to 40, and it was always diminished by one to protect the law, because if you went exactly to 40, God forbid you went over to excess and you did 41, you'd be in violation of the law. So better to limit it to 39, because if you got the count wrong, you went to 40 and you were covered, but if you went to 40, not a good thing. So usually limited to 39. This passage, of course, very interesting to us because it shows some of the difficulties that we are to encounter, and it shows us again that this idea of proclaiming the gospel is not a simple one, and is not certainly in any way, shape, or form an easy one.